Hi everyone. Bit of a wet day today, didn't get a hell of a lot done, but I did spend most of the day trying to think what is going on with the ignition system on that XE 6-cylinder at work. Now, after jumping the gun and jumping the conclusion that it was the carby's fault, wasn't. It's actually losing the signal out of the dizzy, but only at a certain particular RPM. You can give it a big hard rev, it'll go past it, it'll idle. It hates sitting at a steady, consistent, cracked throttle of about 1100, 1200 RPM, which kind of makes it a bugger to run the cam in at 2000 when it won't sit there. It'll just sit there for a little while, it'll run, and it's like you physically have turned the key off. I jumped the gun and just assumed it was a Holly issue because I understand very little about Hollies. Just what I've learnt by mucking around with them over the years. So after talking with someone that knows a hell of a lot more than me, that was my old TAFE teacher back in the 90s, and just spitballing ideas of what was going on, we did a basic diagnostic, or I did a basic diagnostic based off what he told me. Start from the start, check your own wiring out, make sure you haven't stuffed up the wiring going to the module and to the ignition. That was all good. Had the timing light on to make sure the dizzy wasn't over advancing, and it's not. Mechanical advance is working good, it's smooth, the initial is holding steady, and it's not erratic all over the place. Even with the idle of the engine being very choppy, it is a very nice, consistent, steady base timing mark. And yeah, the motor does need not a lot of initial for the factory HEI dizzy to run it. Every 6 I've ever had that's had a bit of work done to it and stuff like that, the Ford 6s do, I don't know why, seem to run really good with anywhere from 10 to 15 degrees initial in them, depending on the combo. The last 250 I did was up at around 14, 15 degrees initial, and that's where I just put this one as a starting point so it'd be easy to fire off, and it does. Fires off really good, starts really good, idle's brilliant, does not run hot, doesn't labour, it just won't rev. So after checking the mechanical advance, chucked the timing light onto the high tension lead coming directly off the coil, just so you had a steady consistent light out of the timing light so we could poke it down or point it down the throat of the carby. You get a nice safe light that's actually quite a clear light that you can then check to see, is the carby atomizing the fuel properly, is it puddling, is it dribbling, what's it doing? Carby was doing everything it's supposed to at idle. Crack it, the squirters give a nice solid squirt, and there's no hesitation, it'll blip through really crisp. Go too high and it gets to the point where I thought it was flooding and drawing fuel through, thought it was a buggered power valve, stripped and rebuilt the carby twice. Power valves, both when you check them out with a vacuum on them, pull and don't leak, and there's no fuel puddle behind them. All the gaskets were all good, there was no burn through marks anywhere or backfire marks and seals, and we blew compressed air through all the orifices and everything's free and everything's clean. So then with the timing light hooked to the coil lead, what I did notice when it did play up, the spark snuffed out. So the coil lead just turned off automatically, and then the motor die labour spit up through the carby. But as the revs died right down because it snuffed, the spark would kick back in right at the end and then have a bit of a hissy fit and backfire and up through the carby. So what I've narrowed it down to, because the modules, mind the fans, the Bosch module that I put on was new. It tests okay, signals all okay. I found an old HEI laying around the shed, and basically in the guts of them, you've got, that's the 4-pin module that runs it. That is the pickup set, stator, whatever they want to call it, that replaces the points out of a points ignition. So as those tips go past each other, they make a, they're a magnet, and they make a pulse, which then triggers the module to turn the coil on and off. That is shot. Sorry, not that. That is shot. in the other dizzy. Idle's really good, but can't handle load. And that other dizzy does have some play in the guide bushes, but it was the one that was in the motor that was running when it was in the car when I pulled it apart. Was a long time ago, didn't seem to be having the same issues that it's got now, and you could muck around with it in the paddock and that, and it used to do fine. This, and all this stuff over here, is what was in the boot of the car. So I thought there must have been a problem with that dizzy, and that's why the original owner swapped it out. This one has got really good guide bushes in it. There is next to no wear in the shaft, and it is solid. So the wiring does look pretty hacked up and feral. So I'm hoping that there is an issue in that, because these you can now buy through Rare Spares. They've got the license to make them now. Seeing how Eklund and Bosch and everyone seems to have gone, nah, no one needs that stuff. We won't make it anymore, it's too old. Now that stuff suits any 6-cylinder HEI dizzy that Bosch made through the years, which was all your Holden GM stuff and Ford as far as the 6-cylinder ones go. And then in the 4-cylinder ones, you had them in Mitsubishis and heaps of other stuff. So, and then the V8 ones were shared between Ford and Holden again. So yeah, the goal through the week is to get this housing cleaned up. We'll free all the mechanical advance mechanism up in there, make sure it's lubed and works fine, which it does. We're just going to make sure it doesn't stick, and clean it all up. Grab one of those pickup module sets from Rare Spares, rebuild this one, and get it ready to drop into the motor. Obviously swap the bottom drive gear over, because that's got the drive gear to suit the Crow cam. And fingers crossed, that now becomes my test distributor, I suppose. And all going well, that's the problem. So again, thanks for sticking around, thanks for tuning in and watching, and we'll catch you back up when we start getting into this and rebuilding it. Okay, bye.